Okay, cool. There we go. Started.
Great. I think we have a good number of people on the call. Does it make sense to kick off now as well?
Yeah.
Welcome to everybody. And sorry, Michael. Let's kick off. I'm sorry, I'm just pulling up my notes here. Just 4 items on the agenda today to have a quick chat through the new Go Please support in Vim Go. Rebecca to give a sort of an update and demo of the Go Please plugin working with Visual Studio Code, and the discussion about Go packages. And then after that, anything else, anything anybody else wanted to bring up? Yep, go for it.
I think Dominic mentioned he wanted to discuss the fact support and analysis.
Yeah, that's on the bottom of that's on the first item on the any other business.
Okay, cool. And another other business is I want to have a discussion of splitting out load modes into like sub bits before I merge it, just to make sure we're all in.
Sounds good. Sorry, I should have added that because I've seen there's been a bit of discussion on it going backwards and forwards. Cool. Anybody else can just jump in at any point once we get to any other business with anything. Billy, I know you may have to head off, so shall I hand over to you quick?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everybody. So I think everybody knows I put Go Please support into Vimgo. It's now by default in Vim 8 and NeoVim using Go Please for auto completion. You can optionally use it for jumping to definitions, and also added jumping to type definitions, and it all seems to be working really well. If there is an escape hatch, if somebody absolutely wants to go back to Go code, they can do that by changing the Omni function. That's all documented now. The one thing that I've kind of come up against that is a little difficult, that would really like to be able to use Go Please to figure out info about certain identifiers, and there doesn't seem to be a way to do that, but I think it's an LSP deficiency, but I'm not 100% certain. So this is like what we can do with Guru for definition, like the Guru definition call.
So you can get all of that information out. There's a couple of different clues you might need to use to do it, but it's in like the hodder and documentation and stuff. So I don't know if you've noticed, but Go Please has an equivalent to a Guru definition on its command line.
Yeah.
So if you look at that, that will show you how to implement exactly the same as Guru definition in terms of LSP calls.
Okay, great. That'll be all I need then. But yeah, it's gone pretty well. The Vimgo has a nice foundation, I think, now that makes it pretty easy to hook in additional changes as they come into Go Please. I think the one thing that I've really noticed is on the auto completion with Go code, we have like a full function signature, and Go Please doesn't provide that right now. It'd be really nice if we could do that either in the I forget what they call it in the LSP. In Vim, it's like I believe it's the word. It's why I end up mapping to the word in Vim's auto completion type. But
so
like,
Billy, you're talking about getting the full signature, are you, of the method or function that's being completed?
Exactly, yeah. And right now, I can mostly kind of stitch it together by taking the completion plus what LSP calls it's like the details, and that's the return values. But it's not like parenthesized correctly. You have to kind of know like when you do that, whether or not the thing you're auto completing is in fact a function, and so it makes it a little error prone to try to figure that out. So I think it'd be really nice if, like, for functions and methods, if we could actually provide that signature instead of just like to include the return values instead of just the name and the parameters.
So LSP has a thing called signature hops that I think is supposed to drive that side of things.
Okay. Is that implemented? That's not implemented yet in Go Please, is it?
Yes.
It is? Okay, cool.
Just on that question, actually, is there? I know there's a Go Please wiki so far. Maybe this is the wrong question / suggestion, so please shoot it down. For those people who, like Billy, who are actually implementing support in some sort of other editor or some sort of other context here, is it worth pulling together a wiki FAQ where maybe these types of things are answered? Maybe your wiki is the wrong place. Maybe there are issues. I don't know. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I think we should. We should probably like extend the wiki further. I think that's a good point because we don't really say what's supported now. I think just because we're adding so much stuff constantly, maybe once a bit more stable, it would be easier. But definitely, we should add that kind of information because yeah, exactly. Signature help is what you would want if you want like a function signature, because the like basically the fields in the completion that we're giving, like the label and the detail, they're like what VS Code inserts and stuff like that. So it's like, we can mess around with it and maybe change things up, but it's more to like make it clean when you're inserting things in VS Code, so that like you don't insert the entire signature, you just insert the parentheses so the user can type things in. But there are ways around that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And also like the I'm trying to look it up real quick. It's under language features, I think. Yeah. So under completion, there's the on the completion item, we end up using the label, right, which is the thing that actually gets inserted, and that's aware of like the cursor position thing. So like it's that is going to be what's would get inserted. I think that it would be really nice to include like the full function signature in the detail, or even like in the documentation field would also be really great for that.
Yeah. So yeah, the label is kind of like what you see when you have like the label, and then is on the left hand side, and then the detail is on the right, and that's why we have like the return type on the right, because it kind of like looks nice that way. But yeah, there's definitely like we could potentially put the signature in. Like, well, I guess we do have the signature in the label, but then the insert text. Well, I guess it's called like text edit or whatever, which is the thing that you actually end up inserting when you hit enter is different.
Yeah,
and that's
absolutely.
Like based on the cursor. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's totally fine. I definitely like the way that the text edit works. Like it's giving us exactly the right thing. But the signature that's provided in the label or the detail, whichever one it is incomplete. And so it'd be nice to like really expand that out. Then we'll like show that in like a preview window. And right now, Vimgo for Go code uses that also for like the Go info command. Which, you know, I can change Go info to use the signature help if I need to.
Okay, so I guess maybe you could file an issue about that, and we can like maybe discuss what we want to put in all the different fields, because there's like a ton of fields that come with completion, and so like we could totally mess around with what we put in there, and we have like extra stuff. Yeah, so sure.
I also thought it'd be really nice if we could actually put like the Go doc into the documentation field.
Yeah, that is definitely step 2 with the completion. Is actually adding the comments. So we'll that's definitely like I think there's probably an issue for that we need to address at some point. But yeah.
Does anybody have any questions about the Vimgo support or how things have shaken out or anything specific?
I've just upgraded excuse me, a lot of banging here. I'll go on mute. I've just upgraded Billy, so I haven't actually had a chance to try it out yet. But as soon as I do, I'll file any feedback.
Cool.
That sounds awesome. Rebecca, sorry, I realized that just shoot down the idea of a wiki, because there's a high chance, I guess, that it'll go out of date so quickly as to not really be very useful. So maybe just issues and getting people copied into the right issues is actually the way forward.
Yeah, maybe, but also I think it's worth having like a list of the features we support. I think it basically maps to like the settings that we'll put in VS Code and things like that. But yeah, like there's so much like stuff that's constantly changing right now that it may like but I feel like we could also definitely have a wiki that at least has the basic information for someone who's curious. So I definitely mean to add more to the wiki and kind of update it more. And also feel free to like edit the wiki yourselves. It's like public, so, and people I think have been editing it, but
great. And just on that question of sort of other people contributing towards Go Please, I've seen 1 or 2 CLs flow in. Presumably that's welcomed. Is there any sort of steer you want to give people on what to work on, what not to work on? How's that process working out? It may be too early to say, but just to sort of give you the opportunity to say, yep, fantastic, more of it, or actually less of this, more of this?
Yeah, so far it's been actually really helpful and awesome that people have contributed, like adding features like and things like that and fixes. So totally feel like everyone's welcome to contribute, and like I totally encourage it. So far what's happened is people have like messaged me and on like Slack, which is probably the preferred way of if you want to contact me, I'll respond there. But people have just messaged me on Slack being like, oh hey, I want to look at this issue, and then they like send me the issue or they make an issue, and then I'm just like, yeah, sure. And if they have any questions, I'll respond hopefully fairly reasonably fast. And then, yeah, just you send me a CL, I'll review it. And yeah, for the most part, it's been very cool and really helpful because, yeah, there's like so many features that we don't even, have the time for them. Also, like I was on vacation last week, so kind of it's definitely great that we still had work going in. Yeah, so like basically what I've done is I made a Go Please label on the Go issue tracker. So all the issues, it's kind of annoying that all the issues are on like the Go repo and not like the golang-tools repo, but that's where they are. And so there's a Go Please label. If you just sort by the label, you'll see I also have been adding the label suggested. And so if it's like an issue that I think is a relatively good starter issue, I'll just put suggested on it. And then that's like something that you can either comment on the issue or ping me on Slack, and I can give you some tips for getting started with it. And then there's a few issues that are more like fundamental, and those are probably like me or Ian should look at them. And so those I usually try to self-assign them. And so if it's assigned to me, then I would say don't touch it because it's probably too annoying. But yeah, that's basically it. So, and please contribute. It's awesome when people do.
That's awesome. Thanks very much. And I guess, Jay, we can sort of get down all those various points in the notes. That would be really helpful in case anybody's just glancing through. We can add links to the labeled issues and specific points that Rebecca picked up. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I could take a look at the notes and link in anything after the meeting.
Yeah, I think all that stuff is written down in the wiki. I wrote like what, yeah, for that stuff.
Perhaps shows I haven't actually properly read the wiki yet. Apologies.
It's not that much stuff, but that is, I think I did right, at least the majority of that down. But yeah.
I think the other thing I'd say is that we've been very focused on like making all the core functionality work, and there's a lot of like details in things like the completion requests, getting all those fields to be the best user interface that you possibly can have. Where these are not large structural changes; they're just things where somebody needs to keep tweaking it and see how well it feels to use. And those are the kinds of things that are really easy to contribute. And then send us a change and say, "Look, I tried this and it feels much better. What do you think?" So yeah, really get involved on that side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I guess should I go into just more the demo part of things on Go Please? Or?
I was just going to say we can certainly change. I'm sorry for the banging. Billy, is there anything else that you wanted to chat through on the Vim Go side of things? Awesome. Yes, then yes, please, Rebecca.
All right, cool. So I'll present
Go,
this meeting. Let's see if I can get this properly working. All right. All right. Am I presenting? Okay, cool. I see it. All right. So I was just gonna go through show how Go Please works from the yeah, I was just gonna show the basics of how Go Please is working right now, and then just go through the settings maybe, just because those are probably the most confusing parts, is like configuring it. So I guess I'll start with the settings actually, just to simplify things. I've been using VS Code. I've heard that it works in pretty much every other editor. So I'm just gonna show the VS Code settings because they're the ones where we're like working the most with Ramya directly to get everything configured right and to maybe enable Go Please as the completion by default at some point, just because it seems to be better than Go Code. So yeah, so basically the settings are everything from below. Oh, can everyone see this, by the way? It's like okay, cool. So basically the settings right now are, you have to enable like the language server, which is kind of like an experimental feature of VS Code. And then you have to specify an alternate language server, which is Go Please. And eventually it'll be the default. So for now you have to do this alternate thing, but at some point Ramya is going to set it to be the default language server. And then you have to actually explicitly enable features. I think for the most part, they all are enabled by default. Or at least I think there's a PR going in that'll enable all these things. some of them are actually not supported by, I just have everything enabled, but some of these are not actually supported by Go Please yet, but they will be. So like rename, for example. But basically enable all the features that you want from it. And then this is also going to be eliminated in an upcoming PR, this build on save and vet on save, turning it off, because otherwise you'll get, if you don't turn this off right now, you'll get duplicate diagnostics from Go Please and from the build. And then also if you want formatting on save and you want Go imports on save, you have to enable the format on save, which is I think also enabled by default for Go, and the code action, which is the source organize imports code action. So these are all the settings. It's kind of confusing, but hopefully it'll be simplified in kind of upcoming iterations. We've been chatting with Ramya about getting everything coordinated so that it works well. So hopefully that'll be gone soon. And then, yeah, basically you open up your editor and go. So this is actually Go Please itself, but and you should get like auto completion, and it should be relatively quick, I think. And an example of what we were talking about with all the completions and the various fields. So here you actually get the signature and the detail will be so there's no return value, but here like the detail will be visible when you hover over it. And so you get the signature when you're doing the completion and the label, but then when you actually hit enter, you only get the function. And then when you add parentheses, you get the signature help, which pops up and just tells you, it's more interesting when you're in a function with multiple, let's try slice stable. When you're in a function with multiple parameters, because as you type something like, whatever, it'll switch to the parameter, like the underlined parameter. So that's signature help and completion. And then there's also the other things like definitions. So go to definition. We'll get you there. So if we do if you want to do imports, you can actually do the source. You can either just like save and it'll add the imports back, or you can do this source action organize imports, and then it'll add them as well. That's just like another way to do it. And then here you can see that you get vet errors. This is actually something that we're going to fix, which is that if you don't necessarily have the file open, or I guess I do have it open, your errors should go away depending on which files you have open. But basically, these are the vet errors that show up from this, but you'll also get errors as you type, like stuff like this. And I know there's been a bug filed about errors kind of persisting. So that's something that we'll be investigating, but for the most part, it should work okay. So that's diagnostics, completion, or I guess any questions so far. Completion, signature help, formatting is the same as Go imports, basically. And then there's type definition, which is also kind of basically definition. Oh, there's also, I guess, hover, which shows you if you hover over something, the signature of the function. And that's also something see, this isn't great, but we're gonna have to. That's a great place to get started if someone wanted to do this. As an issue, it was get rid of all the tags in here. But this would be a great starter issue. But basically, yeah, we need to clean these kind of things up and make the hover look a little nicer. So that's hover. Am I missing anything, Ian?
Can't think of anything.
Oh, someone in the chat. I think I saw something in the chat, but let me look. Oh, I see. Okay. Definition of an import path. I think so. Okay, I guess not. But I suppose, I guess it depends on what files you would. So the question, if people didn't see, was, can you go to the definition of an import path? And I guess not in this case, but I suppose we could have something that does that. I guess it would take you to a random file in the package. I'm not sure. You can do the definition of to an import path here, but
I didn't
go to the package directory.
So I wrote that special behavior in GoDev using Go packages, but I never ported it to Go Please because it's unclear what the editor should do. Because opening a directory in the editor involves opening a new workspace on that directory, which is almost definitely not what you want.
Okay, and then there was another question that was, does the lookup from interface to implementations work? I don't think so. I don't think we have that.
That was
Because-
probably to find references, which we haven't done at all yet.
Yeah. Go to def inside files that are in Go path package. Oh, I don't have modules on in here, but Ian.
In theory, you can. In practice, I might have broken it because I tried it yesterday and it didn't work in one particular case, and I haven't explored the boundaries of where it does and doesn't work. But yes, you should be able to.
I think I've seen it happen.
Modules, but it's broken under some circumstances in the Go root itself.
So yeah, I think that's the majority of the features. I mean, they're all the same features that you've had before in other editors, so they're not too exciting. The only like interesting thing is that we're actually caching, so it should be faster, which is cool. Yeah, so the only real difference is the speed and kind of the integrate, like the real-time diagnostics, because usually you have like build on save errors, but here we have like the minute you type, you'll get a red squiggly, which may not be the best UI, but then eventually it kind of helps you out because you immediately see your errors. And so that's basically the demo of it. I also had pulled up the wiki just in case anybody wanted to clarify anything on the wiki, but just to go over it. Here we kind of I just describe the what's like the status or whatever. And there's like a whole list of every editor that we know that supports it, and that's the part where I was suggesting that people can edit it here, because a lot of people have edited and added editors here, which is awesome. And yeah, so if anybody's using a different editor like Sublime, I think I haven't heard of anyone trying it with Sublime yet. So feel free to add it here. And then here's the like information about contributing. I can add some more here just to make it more clear. And then I just started the FAQ, and then I only have one question, but we can definitely add more bits of information, and probably we should ask a section about like the features that it supports, I guess, would be useful here. So that's for the most part, I think, covering everything.
Rebecca, there was a question in the chat about how much memory it's using for a large project.
I do not have like any information. I know that at some point there was a bug file that it was like eating a ton of memory, but then once we added caching, that went away. I guess I should probably get some metrics on this. I have not tried even looking at it. I know that at some point it was crashing and like eating everyone's memory, but now it's not. So that is the only data I have to offer. It's not doing that anymore. So, but yeah.
It will be quite memory hungry though, because it holds on to the full type check structures, the SSA structures, everything is just held on to.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, we do cache a lot.
Rebecca, thank you very much. I've got a, before I ask my question, I'll just say it's hugely impressive. So thank you to you, Ramya, and anybody who's been involved with getting to this point here, whether it be in VS Code or Billy via sort of Vim, and anybody else who's integrated via any other editor. Very, very impressive and fantastic to see. So thank you.
Thank you, yeah.
My question is actually related to the memory, actually. Again, if I was sort of putting I want to contribute an editor integration hat on, is it the case that you actually end up firing at one instance of Go Please per module? Or is there some way in which once you've started effectively a Go Please instance, you can say within this context, i.e. within this module, do X?
You end up with, we pass in like, I think this is like has been the issue that we kind of just, I think there was like an issue sort of regarding this before. It was that basically anytime Go Please starts, like one of the parameters that gets passed is the root URI, which like tells it what the root is of the workspace that you open in VS Code, and that's the one that's what we pass into the Go packages like directory, and so that basically ends up being like the root like module sort of like facing that. And I think that's why people are having problems when they open like a different file. It'll cause it to like crash because it just doesn't, like the Go package just completely messes up there. And so that has been an issue. And I guess it's one that we didn't really come up with a conclusion of how to solve.
It was actually on the list of things that I wanted to talk about in any other business. I have some thoughts, but I'm not sure what the answers are.
Cool, thank you. Anybody else, please just jump in with any questions on it. Thanks to those who have been submitting them via the messages.
I have a question. Is it possible? Should we have in Go issues a unique template for Go please for filing out issues? For example, like copying the alternate tool settings of a user and like whatever, like what editor they're using, so that it's a little bit easier for you guys to reproduce issues?
That's actually a really good idea.
What I wanted to do was add a bug verb to the go please command line and encourage people to submit bugs using that, because then it can also use the internal information to report the exact build of go please in use and stuff as well.
Yeah, that would be super helpful just to know like if you have modules on or off, like these kind of things that like tend to change things. Yeah, that's a great idea. I'll write that down. Any other questions?
Looks like it's a wrap on that one.
All right.
Thank you very much indeed.
One thing.
So moving on to the next thing, which is adding Go packages to the standard library. Michael, I'll hand over to you on that one.
Yeah, about that. So this is something we've been thinking about since beginning of the work on Go packages. I personally don't think Go packages is ready to go into the standard library, and honestly, I prefer to hold off for at least a few more releases and probably, hopefully, never. But I think this is really something that's going to be sorted out once Russ comes back from his holiday. So, I mean, I'd be interested in hearing other people's opinions on this, but I don't know that it's necessarily going to change the plans.
My only question was, is there any rush to get it in there?
Again, like I personally don't think there is. I think the reason Russ wants to get it into the standard library is that Go build, it doesn't really work anymore. And that was in the standard library, and so I think the idea is like let's replace like with like and keep this functionality which used to be in the standard library still in the standard library. I think that's the main reason. And more deeply than that, I think the reason why they wanted to be in the standard library in the first place is I think there's this idea, which I personally think is wrong, that like you should try to like write pure programs that only use the standard library. And so this will like support people with that type of thinking, but I think that's a mistake. Well, I guess to answer your question, I don't think there's a rush, but
it was. I wasn't really looking for like a definitive answer. I was just trying to sort of voice what the thinking might be there. The only other one question I might have was actually a conversation that happened in the tools channel on Slack earlier on, where someone was talking about their previous use of Go build in order to determine the directory of a package. Now with Go packages, we don't have that, of course, because Go packages sits atop lots of different build systems, as my understanding goes. In those other build systems, there is no concept of there being a directory for a package. So if we are talking about merging this into the standard library, there's effectively a loss of information there compared to Go build. Is that something we're going to look to try and address?
No. I think there's some things that you could do before. But I think a lot of those things just they aren't necessary, and I think like people are used to thinking about Go builds a certain way, and we'd prefer that they change the way they think about them rather than try to keep everything exactly the same way it was. I guess another thing that's sort of related to that, I was just looking at this issue today. Someone's writing a generator that needs to look at a vendor code, and they can't pass in the package paths of the vendor packages to packages.load because those aren't the absolute paths of the packages, and what path you load depends on where you are. And that's just kind of like an unfortunate thing, like sort of you're gonna have to work, like they're gonna have to work around that for now. And in the long term, vending won't exist and everyone will be happy. But these are just weird transition times, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It wasn't. I wasn't particularly voicing support for that particular approach of determining the directory and then doing things as a function of that directory.
Yeah.
It's just that if questions like this come up, if actually if you like the face or API of Go build is going to change because it will be replaced by Go packages, then having sort of answers to those questions that will inevitably come up is something we probably want to think about now, as opposed to when it lands in the standard library.
Yeah, I mean, our official line on it is that Go build is really a package that's meant to be used to get information by the Go tool itself when it's doing a build. It's really what it says on the tin. Like, I'm doing a Go build. How do I know like specific information about this package? And like long term, like we want to focus it on that and like tell people, okay, stop using usable packages and so instead you'll have to think a little bit differently about how you're writing your tool, but it's for the best because this was meant to be an internal package.
Yeah, and just picking up on that specific example from the tools channel earlier on, it's where people were using the package path in order to then sideload, if you like, static files or equivalent, i.e. non-Go files. Now, I think that's just an example, and I don't mean to hold it up as a huge example because I don't know exactly how large of a problem it is, but what I'm sort of suggesting is that if we have an FAQ for things like that, the answer will be ... and then we can just start pointing people at those things and go, hey, as you're suggesting, this is the new way to think about it, and it looks like these steps 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any other points, questions on Go packages moving to standard library? All sounds good. Thank you very much. Michael, is there anything else on Go packages you want to talk about? I didn't mean to narrowly focus it on just that one point.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were two other things. Let's see, what were the other ones? There was the load mode issue, and there was that was the main other thing about Go packages. But basically, like unifying load syntax and load all syntax. So I guess I'll give my thoughts on this in a little bit of background. So when Alan was creating Go packages, there was this idea of having like kind of a linear ordering of load modes, where each successive load mode would provide more information, and that means that if you wanted to get something that was only available at like load mode X, but you didn't care about stuff in load mode X-1, well, you just had to get it and deal with it. And I think that's sort of the deal with load syntax. I think most people who are calling load syntax don't care about dependencies at all. But because load syntax is greater than load imports, they got all that information. And so if we moved into the bits world, really, I think most of those users would be happy with just asking for syntax and not for imports. And I think that's like long term where we want to move people. And so, this idea, there was this counter proposal. I guess to provide a little bit of background, we're proposing to split load modes into a set of bits that you could use to specify what parts of the package you want to fill in. They kind of correspond to the fields in the package struct. You say, I want these fields, and we populate only those fields. And one of those fields is imports. There are two fields for imports. One populates the imports, and other populates imports and loads, or the other loads dependencies. So the idea is if you ask for dependencies, you're going to get the same information for all of your dependencies you get for the current package, which I think is usually is correct most of the time. But if we did that, we'd have to unify load syntax and load all syntax. There's no way around it. Unless we added separate bits for, I want this information and I want this information for my dependencies for all the bits. I think that makes the API more complicated, only so that we can not unify load syntax and load all syntax, but we don't want people to use load syntax or load all syntax in the longer term anyways, because they're being deprecated, but we can't remove them because we promised to keep them. That was a bit of a ramble. Does anyone have any questions about what I just said so I could clarify it?
Can I just ask one quick question to start with? Where are we in this process right now? Are you essentially looking for people to look at that CL and offer thoughts? Or are you just looking still to gather ideas? Or if you can maybe just sort of summarize, because that might help to sort of frame.
I was expecting more comments, and I haven't received them, so I figured I'd reach out now and see if anyone has anything to say. Honestly, I'm pretty happy with the way it is now and want to go ahead and merge it, but I don't want to do so without having a discussion about it, because...
So just to summarize, the CL that I'm aware of, we can and has potentially been summarized in previous notes. I just can't recall having seen it. That's essentially the one you're talking about, which people should look at, sort of final chance to say whether they like it, don't like it. Is that a fair summary?
Yes. I'd like to add another note. So Roger asked if I think if we could make a V2. I would really like to make a V2
of tools
of this package, but we're stuck in this crazy world of modules right now, and we don't have any way of adding versions. I mean, like those of you who noticed that we added module go mod files, notice we explicitly did not tag versions because it opens a whole rat's nest of issues. And I think it's kind of unfortunate, but we will not be adding versions for a while. And so we are kind of stuck in this weird world of backwards compatibility.
Can I offer perhaps unpopular opinion? I know you've said you won't break compatibility, but just break compatibility. How painful would it be if we didn't do it now and lived with effectively a wart on the API, for want of a better phrase? That wasn't particularly palatable. Sorry about that. Versus just saying, oh no, we're going to stick to our guns and keep it compatible.
So it's interesting, right? Like, I think the solution with the bits is kind of the best of both worlds, in that we're keeping compatibility technically, right? Whereas if we broke compatibility, like those load modes would stop existing. We're providing them, your code will build, and it breaks compatibility in the sense that something that was fast will now be slow. But it doesn't break build compatibility. It doesn't break the actual output behavior of your program. And in the long term, if we do make a V2, we just remove these deprecated load modes. So I think we can't have our cake and eat it too, but we can have our cake and eat a few slices of it. I think that's what we're doing. Yeah, it sucks. By the way, another reason why I don't want to put it in the standard library yet, because once it's in the standard library, the compatibility guarantee is even more strict than what we have now.
Well, that was kind of why I was asking the question, is if you want to just sort of clean it all up and just say, wipe the slate clean and say, sorry, folks, but we're now, this is what it looks like.
If we do move it to the standard library, we will not move load mode over with it.
No.
Because that's already...
Okay, that's a different way of thinking about it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Effectively, the one in the std lib would be V2 and we would make these changes on the way in.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's what the bits would allow us to do. We would mark a part of the API is deprecated. Deprecated means it's not making it to V2. We're only supporting it because we have to. That's kind of where we're going. I mean, I am certain we're going to make more changes like this where we have to keep backwards compatibility, and we will, but we will say like, this is what we want you to use. Yeah, but breaking backwards compatibility, I think, is not an option. We already got yelled at for people for making changes that we said we were going to make. I don't want to go much further than that.
Yeah, that whole, if and when it moves to the standard library, that effectively being V2 is certainly one way around that, because people have to refactor their code to use the standard library version in any case. I hadn't thought about that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, if we do move to the standard library, my preference would be we move to the standard library and tell people to not use the version of the standard library. And I mean, it's what? And then this would be like the version of packages for people who are like standard library purists and don't want to depend on anything else, because there are people like that out there. And everyone else who's like okay with not having the standard library compatibility guarantee, something slightly less strict, would use something that, I don't know, we could fix bugs on a faster than 6-month time frame. But that's what I'm thinking. So, we'll see what happens when Russ gets back.
Fantastic. So we'll make sure that CL link is circulated. Daniel's not on the call today because otherwise I think he would have just chipped in. I apologies, I've not been keeping up to speed with it.
I've added it to the notes already.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
The two people who were most vocal about this are not here. So.
I was just going to say, is it even worth talking about? Maybe there's something you want to share on that issue that Dominic wanted raised. If there's a discussion required, then maybe we kind of need Dominic for that. But if there's points you want to make, summarize on the call, please go for it. That sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the point. The analysis API makes a distinction between facts and results. Results are stuff that you pass between analyses. Facts are stuff that you pass between packages for the same analysis. And these are like very clearly defined things, and it helps allows us to make certain guarantees when we're like parallelizing the work of running the analyses. Now the problem is the fact API is just so darn convenient, and the result API isn't, because you have to like make your own result type. So there's this question of like, well, can I use the fact API to share stuff between analyses? Because I have things that are shaped like facts, and this is like just more convenient. Like, can I use this? And I had a discussion about this with Alan, and I think like it would make the API more convenient, but it kind of muddles this distinction between facts and results, and then it, would raise the question like, what are results for anyway? Once we merge, if we allow results to be, what are essentially results now to be shared through facts. And I think more than that, like, there's like a real problem that once we make a change like to the API in this open source world, like that's it. It's like we can't put it back in the bottle. Like it's gone. Like so. Like my feeling is we should be very conservative about making these changes. So I'm leaning towards not making that change, maybe making it a little bit more convenient to share results. Hopefully that could remove some of the need. There's like a missing feature to enumerate facts, which would allow you to share them through results. That would be necessary for that, but we can do that.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, was this request to make facts available as results, or the other way around?
This is a proposal to allow sharing facts between analyses, which is essentially making some result data that has to be shared via results now to be able to be shared via facts. So the opposite, I guess.
Okay, so you have results now.
You have facts that you want to share between analyses.
Okay, so facts like cross packages, like stuff that gets serialized into the .a file.
Yeah.
Into disk.
And
so now the facts are part of a public API for each analysis, whereas before each analysis could change the fact to be whatever it wanted. So now like that's imposing a new compatibility constraint on analyses, right?
Yeah. I mean,
that's really scary.
Dominic's idea would be that we would make most facts unexported, so you can't actually modify them, and you'd export the facts that you wanted to share, and thus, allowing other people to get at them, which I think would avoid a lot of those problems. But yeah, there's this unintended consequences, and once we make this change, we can't unmake this change, and we'd really like to try to do something more conservative before making a change like this. I don't know if we can have this.
No, it's a super summary, I think, because at least it then gets sort of down in a recorded form. It's sort of the background to it. We've got a link to the issue, which can go into the notes as well. I guess again, what you'd like people to do is take a look at the issue, think about it, even if they're not working with it right now, maybe thinking about how what they work on might map to it, whether they'll hit the same issue as Dominic or whether they'll sort of fall on the same side of the argument as you or some other point, and just get that added to the issue. Is that?
Yeah, cool. I think I saw something on the chat that just flew by about shelling out, but I didn't get the chance to read the whole thing. How do we?
I can read it out for you if you like. It's Roger saying, it's a bigger issue for me that Go packages shells out to the Go tool by default, to be honest. I think that's a bit unfortunate, although he understands why.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but that has to be that way. Sorry.
Cool. I think we've got load modes. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Anything else from anybody on that particular point?
I think it's really important that it shells out, because then you can have Go Please built with one version of Go that's different from the one that you're using in your workspace. Otherwise, are you getting all the module bug fixes? Probably not. You could get some really weird, one view of the world is not what the build tool sees, and issues like that. But if the concern is about performance, that's definitely something that I'm thinking more about. I have a large CL to cache package information in the the Go build tool that should improve list performance by 30 to 50%. And another change is planned before the freeze to basically cache what go/build collects for the go list command, to put that information in the build cache and access that with stat metadata. So basically kind of what get status is doing without having to actually read the files to tell whether something has changed. That would save us a bunch of time loading packages. Most of the time we actually spend is parsing. There's relatively little I/O time. It's surprisingly CPU and memory bound. So just loading that memory data out in a binary format should speed it up a bit. I'm not quite sure how much, but on the order of 20%.
Fantastic. Cool, thank you. Oh, that's thanks from Roger as well. So we covered the load modes, Dominic's issue. Ian, did you want to talk about how in an editor we specify context or the main, sort of more concrete, the main module, and how we then pass that information to Go, please?
I mean, this is a really, really difficult subject, and it's been discussed a few times, and we still don't have any really good answers. The fundamental problem comes down to you have to start from somewhere that is a module in order to understand the dependency graph in any useful way. And it must be the module the user expects it to be. And part of the problem is agreeing with ourselves what the expectation of the user even would be, and coping with all the weird edge cases that actually don't match what people expect. So for instance, one of the ones that came up recently was repositories that don't have a go.mod in their root folder, but do have it in a subfolder. And the suggestion, that none of the suggestions actually work for all sorts of complicated reasons. I haven't really bothered to describe all those reasons in detail. But another pattern that's starting to turn up is people that have multiple folders, each of which has a go.mod and no go.mod in the root, which is why the original suggestion of just find the go.mod and assume that's the root doesn't work, because then you have to pick one. And then, when you start dealing with nested modules, and you're looking at a source file from inside a nested module, there was a suggestion about, walking upwards from the source file to find the go.mod and then assuming that's the root. But if the user's opened the root directory which had a go.mod and it has a replace that points at the child go.mod, and you do a jump to definition from a source file inside the child, you'll get the wrong answer if you use the child's go.mod instead of the parent's go.mod, or at least an answer that disagrees with the parent, which will confuse people when they have the same source file open twice and one of them has breakpoints that don't work. So it's a very, very complicated subject, and I'm not sure what the answers are, but one extra thing I think there is one extra thing I think Go Please could do that enables editors to make slightly more decisions. So one of the problems inside Go Please is that we cache very heavily, and that means that we need the full dependency graph, which means each cache is specific to a module. So if you have multiple modules being considered, the cache becomes completely useless across those two modules.
Just to check one point there, you have one cache per main module, correct?
We have one cache, full stop.
Yeah, no, but per main module.
Running binary.
So do you have a running binary like per workspace, per main module, or is it like per module in the
VS
build
Code
list for that build?
starts one Go Please per workspace. Which
Okay,
in general means per window. Most people don't have multi-window workspaces.
But if you require like 40 modules transitively, you won't have like 40 instances.
No, you'll have one instance of Go Please that is entirely cached from the root dir that you handed the initialization call. And that's kind of like, the cache has to be for the root module and nothing else. And that's not something that we could reasonably change. Now, we could theoretically have multiple, so we have this concept called a view, which is what the cache lives inside. Theoretically, you could have multiple views, but at the moment, the cache is tied to the initialization call and the root dir, which means there would be no way for the same running instance of go please to start a new view, because you can't send it a new init call. That's not how the LSP protocol works. But the LSP does have this concept of workspace folders. So we could start switching to understanding workspace folders and start a new view per workspace folder, which would mean that one instance of go please would support multiple caches and multiple views. But then the question starts becoming, how do you pick which view any given, like when you get a go to definition, which of the views do you send that go to definition command to? We start getting into the complicated discussions about what the right way to do that is. But I think it's slightly more sane, because we could easily mandate the rule that, you walk up the tree and find the tightest workspace folder that file is part of and use that view. And then the editor can control that by setting the workspace folders when it started up. But that's kind of the thought I wanted to leave people with to think about, see if it helps solve the problem before I get thrown out.
Cool.
Thanks, everyone.
And we can pick up the conversation in a thread on Golang's tool on Slack. Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Rebecca, for recording and demos, etc.
Thank you.